Hello. Have you been wanting to get into ballet class, but for some reason have been stopping yourself short? This is something that happens to so many people. It might be that you did ballet as a child and remember the classes that you did and thought, oh, maybe I don't think I can do something that strict anymore. Or it could be that it's something you've never done, but you've just heard stories about how ballet is so hard, you have to be so strong, you have to be super bendy, and yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on forever. My name's Claire, and I am an RAD ballet teacher, that's Royal Academy of Dance, and I've been teaching ballet for over 10 years now, and I want to help you get into ballet. So the first thing, you do not have to do exactly what the teacher asks. Okay, they will give you tips, they will give you advice, and for sure, along the safety lines, you need to follow that advice. For example, big thing with ballet is the main thing you'll notice about ballet is that the legs are turned out. In fact, the first thing you notice is that the feet are turned out, but it's actually I'll go back a little bit so you can see, it's the entire leg that's turned out, not just the feet. Now, what a lot of people when they first learn to dance is they turn their feet out and don't realize you have to hold the muscles in the top of your leg in order to make that turnout. Now, if a teacher tells you to adjust your turnout to work towards where your hips are allowing you to turn out, you need to listen to that. You need to do that. Okay, so that's just one little disclaimer ahead of everything. But everything else, usually, unless you're going along to the professional ballet class at Pineapple or Danceworks on a Monday morning, everything else in most adult ballet classes are adjustable or adaptable. For example, if I go through the class one by one, that will help it seem more logical for you. For example, plies. The first exercise you normally do, you'll normally do a bit of a warm up just to get the blood flow going and to get yourself feeling ready to dance. And one of the first exercises you do at the bar is a plie, which is fine. It's just, if I get back far enough, it's just bending your knees and stretching your legs and keeping it nice and squeezy, but that's another story. So the first exercise you'll do is plies. Now, the plie I just showed you is what we call a demi-plie. Your heels stay firmly on the ground. Now, the more advanced version of that is a grand plie, where your heels peel off the ground. Now, in my classes, for sure, I make a point of reminding people that it is optional. You do not have to go all the way down. And in fact, I don't do grand plies in the first exercise. I actually leave them till a bit later in the class when our knees are a little bit more warmed up and a bit more activated and a bit more ready to work. Okay, so a grand plie is where you go all the way down, peel the heels, and then you push those heels back down to come back up again. You do not have to do the whole. You could do a slow demi. Yes. You could also do a grandish. You could go down a bit, let the heels peel a bit, then push them back down. So you're still getting that feeling of doing a grand plie, where you're leaving your heels on the floor as long as possible before you peel them up. And you're strengthening your legs, but you're not putting your knees at risk. Yeah, because if you've not been active, or if you are a little bit older, grand plies do start to get a little bit hard. So make the exercise work for you. When you go to a ballet class, especially first time, I would certainly speak to the teacher beforehand, if possible. Sometimes if it's a really big class, you don't get the chance. And if it's a really big class, I'm sure they wouldn't be offended if you adapted a few things to make it work for you. But with most adult ballet classes, it's not like your children's ballet class that you did when you were 7 years old. And bear in mind, when I was 7 years old, ballet was really strict. It's not the same now. Even for 7-year-olds, it's not as strict now. We tend to work with the people's bodies rather than trying to force them into the right position for ballet. So bear in mind, you are coming in as an adult, and when it's your first classes, you may need to adapt things to make it work for you. You don't want to do a class and push yourself, and wake up the next day and regret the whole thing. So feel free to adapt things. So I've already talked about grand plies. Tendus, that's a fairly basic thing. You've got both feet on the floor, you're stretching one leg. Yeah, you might find you can't point your foot as much as you'd like. The most important thing with that is to try and keep both legs straight as you're doing the exercise. But there's not really a huge amount to adapt. But things like lifting your legs off the floor You can adapt that. You don't have to. If something's being done really high, you can keep it nice and low. So for example, grand battements, développés, fondus, all of those. So a fondue, you could do here, and you could just peel and just extend to the floor, and in and just extend to the floor. You don't have to do it on there if it's not working for you. The same with développés. You can just do anything just off the floor. It doesn't have to be really high. And I'm sure most teachers will understand, if they see someone working at a low level, they will understand that you're working within your mobility at the time. With all my classes, I also say there's the option to do non-jumpy exercises, okay? This was all instigated when a lady came to me quite early on. She was relatively young, actually, and she had bad knees. And she said, I'd love to do ballet classes, but I can't do grand pliés and I cannot jump. I've been told if I do either of those, my knees will be shot and that'll be it. So I adapted my class so she didn't have to do grand pliés, and every single jumping exercise I had a non-jumpy version that she could do. Now obviously if it's a traveling sequence, you would need to arrange with the teacher that you could do a slightly different variation. Maybe speak to the teacher and say, I really can't jump. Is it possible for me to do a non-jumpy version, say at the back of the room, so that others can travel forwards and I won't get in the way? I hate to say the word get in the way, because there's nothing more intimidating than saying to someone, oh, stay back there so you're not in the way. It's not that, but if someone is traveling and you're doing something that's going to keep you more on the spot, then it would be better if you're behind the people traveling so they can move freely without running the risk of tripping you over or crashing into you. So that's what I'd recommend for any traveling jumps. With normal jumps like sautés and changements and things like that, jumps that are done on the spot, I literally set a little sequence every exercise where it will go something like this: at a bend and a stretch and a rise and a lower, bend and a stretch and a rise and a low. You could do a bend and a point and a bend, and so on. Yes. Again, that's something maybe to speak to your teacher about. Say, would you mind if I just stood at the side doing that? If it's a big, busy class, yes. With my dancers, I just have them in place with all the other dancers, and anyone who chooses to do the stretchy, risey exercise, they can stay in their place and do that exercise. Another thing that some people have issues with is shoulders, especially women of my age, okay? So research has been showing that it's very much connected with menopause, unfortunately, because obviously our joints tend to get more inflamed the less estrogen we have in our system. But I'm not a doctor, so that's a whole other ball game. But it's something I have noticed a lot with my Silver Swans dancers, is being able to put your arm up in fifth. It can be really tricky and really painful. If it's painful, it's not necessarily going to do you any good. So maybe if the arm needs to go up there, maybe just lift it to second, or do it, if you're doing, say, a port de bras over to the bar like that, you could do it like that, yes. Or if it's going port de bras back, you could do that port de bras in arabesque rather than having to lift that arm, because that movement going up to fifth, either way, that way or forwards, can really play havoc with anyone who's got a bit of a frozen shoulder. Okay, so just be really mindful of that. Listen to your body. If your body's kind of, I wouldn't say screaming, but if your body's giving you indications that something is painful or something's not right, listen to it. My biggest advice for anyone in their first ever ballet class: definitely go for a beginner's ballet class. Don't try and shoot for the moon on day one. Go for a beginner's ballet class. It's much better to do a class that you think, oh, that was easy, and then ramp it up a bit, rather than the other way around, diving into a class where you think, oh my goodness, I'm never coming back. And then pace yourself when you're there. If anything starts to feel like, oh my gosh, my muscles are cramping, stop and stretch those muscles. Yes, again, it's an adult ballet class. It's not like your 7-year-olds or 10-year-olds or teenagers needing to work really hard. Yes, the more you work, the better you'll get. But at the same time, you're doing this for fun. And there's a big difference between when you're, say, especially a teenager who's potentially wanting to go to college and needs to kind of do the boring bit and work through the bits where they really don't feel like doing it. That's a slightly different way of training. But even that, these days, we work within people's mobility and people's abilities. Yeah, it's good to nudge that edge, but you don't want to push through it and give someone a long-term injury. So, and even as an adult, you can push those edges. You can work to get better and better and better. And I have some adults who are going into their intermediate foundation and doing point work. And I'm sure lots of other teachers have adults working at a really high level. And again, you're all grown-ups and you can choose how to make it work for you. You can think in your head, okay, I'm really going to work on holding that turn out in the top of my leg today. That's your goal. You're not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm just going to get through the class. Yeah, you'll have a much more rounded attitude to your training, and the teachers know that and they respect you as grown-ups. Another adaptation that can be made in my classes, I always do rises at the end of the bar, but you can adapt that. You can do less rises or do a plie a little bit more often. Some of my dancers do 15 rises before they plie, some do 3, some do 7. It really depends what works for you. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know how you get on in your first ballet class, and let me know how adapting movements has helped you. And if you want to dance with me, check out the link in the caption below, and looking forward to seeing you dancing. Share this with your friends, do like it, and ask me questions below. See you later. Bye.